Well, good afternoon, everybody. My name is Mark Smith. I am Group Managing Director of People2People in Australia and Frog Recruitment in New Zealand. It is Friday afternoon in the middle of September, and that means it is our regular employment and jobs market update for Australia and New Zealand here live on Facebook and YouTube. So we've got a packed agenda today, so I'm not going to spend any time talking about the weather, although it is a little bit on the overcast side here in Sydney, but the southerly bluster came through yesterday afternoon. That's enough on the weather. Let's get into what we're actually going to be talking about today. I'll do my usual market overview about what's happening throughout the country. Then we'll get into our numbers section. We'll spend a little bit of time on the numbers today, particularly because of the shock announcement yesterday of a decline in our unemployment rate here in Australia. So we'll try and work out what's actually going on there. Then we'll catch up with our Director of New South Wales, Catherine Kennedy, for an update of what's actually going on in New South Wales. And we'll also explore a little bit about flexible working and part-time with Kat. Then finally today, we'll be catching up with Mark Green from our supply chain management team. He's got a couple of opportunities that he particularly wants to talk to everybody about. So I'll be looking forward to hearing those from Mark as well. So let's get into it today. Let's start. By the way, if you have any comments, please pop them down the bottom in Facebook and in YouTube. We can see them within a few moments of you actually writing those comments. So hopefully if you've got any questions, then we can respond to them in real time and make sure that you get the most out of the broadcast today. So make sure you do that. So now let's though get into my regular market update. So the market this week, well, there's been a marginal improvement in the number of vacancies that have been listed with People2People. I wouldn't suggest that there is a trend here at all. If there is any trend, there's been a slight improvement in the number of contract and temporary vacancies that have been listed with us over the last 4 or 5 weeks. And I'm not bold enough to say, though, that the market is that type of work is actually on the continuous improve. I just don't think we're there yet. But there is a slight improvement in the market just around the country. Victoria, we felt, was holding up during the extended lockdown, with vacancies still being listed with us, permanent, either working from home and some specialist temporary and contract work. It has softened a little bit in the last week. I don't think there's anything particularly there. Maybe there's a little bit of fatigue when it comes to the lockdown. I don't think there's any surprises there. In WA, the macro numbers look great. I mean, if you even Mark McGowan, the Premier out there, if you believe Mark, they should be their own separate country. But the macro numbers look quite good. But our experience being a middle market office recruiter, we're not seeing that translate into new vacancies being listed with us in WA. Anecdotally, through my colleagues in the industry, we're seeing that engineering is holding up, and that if there is a little bit of work coming through from our own perspective in technology and property. But otherwise, generally, it's quieter in the office than we would otherwise expect. Queensland, on the other hand, is a little bit nervous, jittery. We describe the number of vacancies that we have listed with us as a pipeline, and our pipeline depletes the moment there is an increase in the number of cases in Queensland. It's almost like you could see a direct correlation between the number of vacancies listed with us and the actual number of coronavirus cases that are read out on the news every night. So yeah, Queensland, it's okay. But very nervous, I would suggest. In New South Wales, it's steady as she goes. And I think that's how I would describe the market overall. I'd say that it's steady as she goes with pockets of optimism and improvement. But let's see how we travel next week. So now let's move on to what has been controversial over the last couple of days, and that's our numbers section. Right, so the numbers. So yesterday, we had the unemployment rate released for Australia. And the way I tweeted it yesterday, it was a shock, the shock announcement that the unemployment rate in Australia declined from its 22-year high in July to be 6.8% in August, a decline of, I think, a 0.4 percentage points. Completely caught everybody by surprise. I am still not really confident to be able to explain to you why that is. So what I've got here is a few charts that I can show you, and I'll read to you some of the comments that I've discovered in my research, trying to work out what actually happened yesterday. So Jaden, if you could pop up the first chart, which is the breakdown of the actual unemployment numbers. And what we've got here is that the official Bureau of Statistics figures show that 111,000 jobs were created last month, pulling headline unemployment rate down from 7.5 to 6.8%. The percentage of underemployed people who wanted to work more hours than they did remained steady, and I think that's interesting. The underemployed remained steady at 11.2%. Underemployment rate was steady at 11.2%, but the underutilization rate declined 0.7% to be at 18 percentage points. The total hours worked rose 1.6% last month, but it's still down 5.1% on August 2019 last year. So there was an increase in the number of hours, but still substantially down on last year. And the last thing I would say about this particular chart is that there are fewer people looking for work. So what I'm talking about here is the participation rate, and the participation rate rose 0.1 percentage points, and so that's 64.8%, but it remains well down on the 65.9% level recorded before the first lockdowns. So they're the major points from the raw data that was actually brought through yesterday. So what does it actually mean, besides the shock and awe of a decrease in unemployment? Let's now move, though, to the second slide, which is the state-by-state breakdown. And what we can see here, and I'm just going to read out these numbers because from our experience, South Australia is holding up. There is work in South Australia, but it has now moved to be in first place with 7.9% unemployment, followed by our jittery Queensland, then Victoria, which sounds counterintuitive given the lockdown, then WA, New South Wales, Tasmania, and then we've got both you want to live in a territory, Northern Territory and the Australian Capital Territory, so the ACT, at 4.2%. So some remarkable numbers there at 4.2% for the NT and ACT. I mean, what's going on there? I particularly am stunned by the decline from 7.5% in July for the Northern Territory to 4.2%. I'm yet to find any commentary as to why that is. So if anybody knows what that reason or has some view on it, I'd be please share your thoughts here today, because I'm not entirely sure. So now let's move on to, so that's the broader number. Let's have a look at the historical context. This is the effective rate, and you can see that the official rate, which is in red, versus the effective rate of unemployment, which includes those on 0 hours and those who have left the labour market. So you can see that there's that gap is still, I mean, it's improved, but there's still a substantial gap there. I think it's 9.5%. I did see something from Shane Oliver, one of the prominent economists here in New South Wales, about this effective rate. And he made an interesting observation, saying that if Australia measured unemployment the same way as the US, including stood down workers as unemployed, then the jobless rate would be 7.9%, down from a high of 11.8% in April. And I thought that was quite interesting. So when we're comparing nations, we're not actually comparing apples with apples. So the last slide I'd like to share with you is the participation rate, which I think really comes to the crux here of what's going on at the moment, and particularly with the unemployment rate going down. Here is a trend line of the participation rate since the recession in 1990. The reason, and thanks to Callum Pickering from Indeed with this graph as well, you can see then from 1990 that there's normally a decline in the participation rate during a downturn. and you can see that decline, and then you can see participation improve all the way through, and then the dramatic decline with the COVID crisis right at the end. There's a couple of comments here that I'd like to read to you. The first one is, and both of them are from Bjorn Jarvis, actually, who's the head of labour statistics at the Australian Bureau of Statistics. I got this from an article in The Age, I think it was. And he said that employment was up, but the number of hours being worked across the board were only rising marginally. So what that means is that the number of people who are actually in work has increased. I think it was 111,000, but the number of hours have only gone up marginally, which means that there's more people working fewer hours. So it becomes a question of part-time and flexible working. And I'm going to explore that a little bit with Catherine Kennedy, our New South Wales director, in a few moments. The other thing that he said, and I'll just read this to you, is that employment rose almost 1%, but hours worked rose by a modest 0.1%. Hours fell by 4.8% in Victoria, compared to 1.8% increase across the rest of Australia. So again, it makes it complicated with the whole Victorian decline mixed in with the national numbers there as well. The last thing I'd like to say on all of this is that there is a little bit of a cherry on the top of these numbers, and that was that youth jobless rate declined from 16.3% to 14.3%, which I thought was a great result in this really complicated and quite unexpected decline in unemployment that was released yesterday. So that's it for our numbers section. Now let's deep dive a little bit more into the New South Wales market and have a look at what's going on. We'll discuss, I suppose, more of this part-time and flexible working arrangement with Catherine Kennedy from our New South Wales team. G'day, Kath. Can you hear me?
Hello. Yep, I can hear you. I've got you. We're all good.
Yep, I thought I was going to have a little bit of technical difficulty there, and if anybody can hear some banging in the background, that's because I think that we're getting some new neighbours downstairs, and they're doing a little bit of construction work. So please bear with us on that one, I suppose. But thanks for joining us, Kath. So let's start then, I suppose, with how's the market in Sydney or New South Wales at the moment?
You actually took the words out of my mouth when you said steady as she goes. What I would have said is just, it's steady week on week. So for the first time in a long time, I think and I am not brave enough to say that it's a trend, but looking at the last 7 or 8 weeks, we're seeing fairly consistent job numbers week on week. So it's certainly not, booming. There certainly hasn't been a flood of hiring activity, but we're not seeing the same, slow decline that we had been seeing in months prior. And in terms of our job numbers, even just the week that we've just closed last week, it's 60% up on the bottom of the market for us. So there's been a big improvement from that bottom of the market in April, but it's really just very, very, it's steady. I'm nervous about, and this is why I'm not brave enough to say that it's a trend, because once the JobKeeper changes come into play, and then eventually, JobKeeper fades, how that's going to play out, I'm still unsure. But it's just week in, week out, steady as she goes.
Yeah. Okay. What about in terms of industries? Is there any particular industries or?
Yeah, there's definitely some pockets of activity. So in the markets that we operate in, definitely the strongest for us has been within legal. So it's actually relatively buoyant in legal, particularly around insurance, employment and family law. Although in the last month or so, even other areas of law are starting to pick up a bit. Our supply chain team's been relatively strong, and Mark Green, who I know you're talking to after, might be able to comment more on that. But we've seen a particular demand for, no pun intended, but demand planning and analytics and roles that drive efficiency. Obviously cost control and efficiency is on the agenda for all organisations. So supply chain's has been strong. What's been unusual about this downturn, and I think you mentioned this before, is around the volume of our temporary vacancies. It just hasn't followed what would have been, predictable, what we would have predicted in downturns gone by. What I'm encouraged by, even just over the last couple of weeks, so hopefully this goes on to be a trend, is that we are seeing more activity in the temp market, and we are seeing a return of shorter-term temporary assignments. So the last few weeks, we've had a couple of short-term, a receptionist working for a couple of days. And so that's indicating people are starting to come back to the office as well, which I think then, that will breed confidence, as well.
And do you have any particular take on what's going on with the unemployment numbers, by the way?
No, I have. Look, my first reaction, I was surprised. I remember I looked at it and I went, what? That just doesn't seem to make sense, because whilst we haven't seen things getting worse, we haven't seen it, we haven't seen any substantial shift or things getting a lot better. I think the trend towards part-time, I think now it's almost the norm rather than the exception, that people don't work a standard Monday to Friday, 9 to 5. So, surely that's got to be a factor. I did read some commentary yesterday that looks a little controversial potentially. It's not necessarily my view, but this commentator suggested that perhaps the requirement for job seekers to look for work, so that only came back in August, there was sort of a reprieve for a period of time, that perhaps, that now being a requirement has actually meant that more people have gone into work. That was an idea that was floated by this particular commentator. But yeah, I mean, I think it really, is a reflection or a factor of confidence and people just saying, look, I'm not going to work anymore, so I'll just take myself out. And that's why that the sort of the real term metric is possibly better, that, about people that actually also factors people who are not working any hours or who are on reduced hours. I think that's probably a stronger indicator.
Well, I think that this will be one of the this whole dynamic that we're seeing playing out in some of the statistics now will be one of the legacies of the COVID crisis, in that we may have greater participation but at lower numbers of hours, and therefore the unemployment number may not be. The whole idea of underemployment and underutilization and that definition come into play. So is a 38-hour week really what everybody is wanting to do and will be doing? And is it more about, okay, well, I do want to work 24 hours a week or 3 days a week or whatever it happens to be, and that dynamic between the participation and then participating at a certain number of hours. And I think maybe how does that then translate into unemployment and levels of demand for talent, and does that talent want to be paid more for less hours? There's a whole series of sequences of permutations of what's actually going to happen out of this. Now, I can just see we've got a question here specifically for you. What about customer service and admin jobs in New South Wales, Kat?
There has been, that's probably been more driven by the industries. So we've had certain industries, we've got some organisations that we work with that are within healthcare, some that are in e-commerce, some, anything that involves online purchases, and they've been busy. They've been very, very busy. I would say that administration or support roles are often the place where organisations look to first to save some money. So in industries that have been really hit hard, there's probably been not as much demand there. I do think, though, it will be interesting to see how that plays out as the market improves, because I think our survey that we've done for our P2P post, which we've just released, had some data around this, is that people are being expected to do more with less within their organisations. And so how that's been managed within the company, I think it will be very telling as to, their retention of their staff post-COVID. So, if there's an expectation that they just need to do 1.5 people's work with one person, when there's more opportunities around that might shift. But there's certainly some pockets, and it's more so defined by industry, where customer service and administration has still been relatively strong.
Yeah, interesting. I know that from our Adelaide office, there's a major financial interest on customer service, Marissa, that a major financial institution is reshoring their sort of customer service call centres from over in Manila, and that's creating some demand down in South Australia, which is interesting. Just then, again, that trend of bringing things back on shore and what that actually means.
Mm.
So thank you very much, Kath. That's been very interesting. Thanks for joining us again.
Okay.
If you just want to hold on for a second in case there's any further questions that come through.
Sure.
But now let's move on to Mark Green, who's got the opportunity of the week that that he'd like to talk to us about, or the job of the week, I suppose.
How are
G'day,
you?
Mark.
Hi.
I'm very well indeed. So
Great.
how things in the supply chain management world?
Yeah,
At the moment?
I guess to the same as Kath has said and yourself, it's steady as you go. We've seen some increased movement, so particularly in that perm space, we are seeing an increase in roles for warehouse managers and for supply and demand planners. So very much get the feel that our clients in that space are really sort of planning and getting ready as we come out the other side of COVID. And then on the sort of the warehouse and the side, on the temporary side, we've seen a huge demand over the last couple of weeks for additional staff to deal with extra orders, particularly around for supporting for retail for business as well. So yeah, it's been promising, but I've got a couple of roles. Yeah.
Really interesting. And before you get it, really interesting on the retail front. Hey, that there's still,
Yeah.
although the general consensus is that retail's in trouble, but there is still online retail, and there's still
Yeah.
the logistics side and supply chain side of that retail. Those people who are actually shopping online. So there's still opportunities out there for sure.
Yeah, and a lot of things around recreational things that you can do with social distancing, so hobbies and things like that. So yeah, it's been interesting. There's been some industries that we didn't think would, that I certainly didn't think would do well in this, but have done extremely well.
Yeah, great, fantastic. So we're gibbering on. You've got a couple of jobs you'd like to talk to us about, yeah?
I have, yeah. So I've got I've got a particular job that's not actually sort of Sydney or Parramatta based, but more regional. And it's my colleagues always laugh at me if I pronounce this wrong, because I'm obviously originally a Pom, but I've got a role for in Gunnedah. I hope I pronounced that correctly.
You need a little bit of an you know that I'm from northwest New South Wales, and it's more of a Gunnedah. Like you got right in the nose there, Mark. That England stuff going on. Yeah.
As a recruit for it, I'll practice on that more. But yeah, I'm working with a global company that produces machinery for construction, mining, quarries, and recycling and forestry as well. So they're looking for warehouse assistant, a temp role at the moment. That is some weekend work. The hourly rate's $27 an hour. The indication is in the market that if and when it goes permanent, it would be around about the 50,000 plus super. Need to have a forklift license, ideally high reach as well as counterbalance. Your traditional warehouse store person duties, receiving and dispatch, picking orders as well. So that's one of the roles that I've got, which is not an area geographically that we recruit in. So that's a challenge that I'm keen to fill that for the client.
Yeah, we'll make sure we put up a link to the job in comments for everybody, and for those watching who've got friends and family in northwest New South Wales, it'd be great to share that. Let's get the social recruiting thing going on. Yeah, definitely.
And then the other role I've got is actually a part-time role. So just what you were talking about earlier about part-time is just came in this morning actually. So a medical devices organisation that I work with, looking for somebody on the Northern Beaches, temp role at the moment for about 3 months, 1 day a week, ideally Fridays, from 7:30 till 4:30, depending, may switch to a Thursday, but they're looking for a technical assistant, so somebody who can go into a lot of the hospitals in that area, and they've got a project to do modifications to stretchers and to the ward beds that they that they supply to the hospitals in that area. So modifications, repairs, and testing. Ideally, having a technical background, but you'll be working with a repair service technician. So it's if you've got an interest in engineering or biomedical engineering and an interest in that, they're happy to look at somebody that they can train up that as well.
A student, Mark, for that one?
Yeah, so I was talking to the client this morning, and ideally, if he's a uni student that's doing an engineering degree that can work 1 day a week, be a great opportunity for them, and the client, that would look great on their resume as well. So that's what I'm working on today. So get in touch with me.
Yeah. So what number, if somebody does want to get in touch with you?
02 8270 9766.
Fabulous. Fantastic. Thank you, Mark. Thank you very much for that. And we've got a couple of things here saying, sounds like an interesting role. Things are slowly building, which is excellent. So, yes, there we go. Thanks, Ali. Right. Well, thank you, Mark. That brings us to the end of the broadcast. 26 minutes. I'm slightly over. I've got to start getting myself back in order with that. We should be running at 25 minutes. Before we leave, I just wanted to mention that P2P is working in close association with the RCSA here in Australia and in New Zealand. And there's a new campaign that the RCSA are running called Working Sooner. And you may have seen a couple of their advertisements, etc., that are specifically around how the recruitment industry is working hard to ensure that everybody gets back to work as soon as possible. We've got a short 15-second video that I'd like to show you. Jaden, if you could pop that up for us.
Our industry has found the right job for almost 360,000 Australians, including 100,000 jobs during the COVID crisis. Australian job agencies are getting Australia back to work sooner.
Yeah, fabulous. Fantastic. Thank you, everybody, for watching this afternoon. We'll be back here again, 12:30 next Friday for another market update. We'll see if we can do a little bit of a deep dive into what's going on in WA, because that seems really interesting. So we'll see if we can do that for everybody. Thanks again, and we'll see you next week.